All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for Peek's Growvember webinar series. And like Tara said, my name is Andrea Lopez, and today we will be talking about a few simple steps and guidelines that will make your website more accessible to grow your audience and reach out to all of your users. But first, let me introduce myself very quickly. I started my design journey in 2011, back when I lived in Venezuela. A couple of months after graduating from university, I took off from home to embrace my new expat life. I arrived in Chile in 2016, and after a long search of a work environment where I could grow, both my design career with a user-centered focus and help other people have the website of their dreams, my alliance with TourismTiger was born. I started as a designer in what was a very cool startup, and now I'm the lead designer of my own team. My experience in TourismTiger, the #1 web agency in the world for tour and activity operators, has allowed me to travel to incredible places, learn so much about world traveling, and help people from places I would have never thought of. And the best of all is that it's been from the comfort of my own laptop. So now that you know me a bit better, you might be asking yourselves, why are we here today? As tour operators, one of the biggest challenges when creating a website is balancing a design and feel that you really like, along with a design that is functional, attractive, and useful for our clients. It can be incredibly hard for us to detach from our personal preferences and to step into the shoes of our users and see the world from their perspective when interacting with our services. Our aim at TourismTiger when building websites is creating a space for users to navigate, interact, and access the information in a quick, clear, and smart way that makes sense to them. This therefore means that the key party is the end user. So now that we've established that the main center of attention is our users, one of the big factors to consider when designing a website is accessibility and how to make every little detail and aspect easy and intuitive, as well as inclusive for everyone. Now, people often have the misconception that accessibility refers only to those with disabilities, but that's not true. The Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as ADA, did an exhaustive job setting up standards and regulations so everybody can benefit from the day-to-day technology that has become a crucial part of our lives. Every digital product should comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines when developing, designing, and creating to guarantee that the usability of these products has no distinction and that it's the same for each person, regardless of whether or not they have a physical, sensory, or mental impairment. In today's webinar, I'm going to give you 8 key points that you can apply immediately to your website and as well as other digital products. We're going to cover keyword navigation, informative calls to action, color contrast, cursor interaction, simple language, alternative text, correct markup, and form labels and instructions. All right, let's get started. So the first step is keyword navigation. And for those who don't know, keyword accessibility is one of the most important aspects of website accessibility. Many users with motor disabilities rely on a keyboard, such as blind users, people with tremors, users with little or no use of their hands. Some of them need to use a screen reader software to navigate their way through a website. Many of them can do that by pressing the tab key from the keyboard. jumping from link to link on the page they're browsing. So each navigational item, which includes any button, clickable text, hyperlink, etc., needs a focus indicator. As you can see in this animation that I have here, a basic focus indicator is provided automatically by the web browser, and it's typically shown as a border or outline around the focused element. Sadly, there's been a design trend lately to take these outlines and make them hidden because they don't match the branding or they might look old-fashioned. Shame on them, honestly. So my pro tip for you on this step is to use dev tools like CSS to make the focus indicator more visually apparent and keyword friendly by playing around with the options. Adding a background color or other visual attributes to links and other controls that will receive keyword focus. And remember that no matter the case, the outline can be styled to match your site's designs, colors, and branding. Easy, right? That leads me to our second step, informative calls to action. A call to action, or CTA for short, is a prompt on a website that indicates the user to take some specified action. A call to action is typically written as a command or action phrase, such as sign up or buy now, and generally takes the form of a button or a hyperlink. Now, the problem with most CTAs is that such phrases as sign up or buy now are very unclear when they stand alone, as we established previously that some of our users tab link to link through our site, taking our CTAs out of context. Sign up to what? Or buy what now? Instead, you may want to use or label a button with a call for a quote instead of simply click here. This way, when a screen reader reads the button, the user knows exactly what they're clicking on. Now, in order to make your CTAs more accessible, my pro tip for you is to be descriptive. It goes for any buttons or hyperlinks on your site. So it's crystal clear that the next step is upon clicking. And make your descriptions more specific, instead of leaving them open-ended. Take a look at these examples I have here. Instead of sign up for a newsletter. Instead of book or even book now, why don't you try book tour now or book activity now? And then lastly, just go for send inquiry form instead of just send, right? Your users will thank you, honestly. Now, let's get on to step 3, color contrast. In today's world, contrast and color use are vital to accessibility. Users, including those with visual disabilities, must be able to perceive the content on the page. Color blindness is the most common visual condition where individuals often mistake shades or lose their ability to distinguish colors at all. And according to the National Institutes of Health, around 5 to 10% of Americans are colorblind. These people will have certain requirements in terms of color selection, on top of all of the issues that could come or that could affect any of us when browsing through a website. Our goal here is to make sure our brand colors are contrasting, right? So the foreground color, which could be the text or any other visual information, versus the background color are easy and clear enough to read. Now, contrast is a measure of the difference in brightness between two colors, correct? This difference is expressed as a ratio ranging from 1 to 1. So for example, white text on a white background to 21 to 1, which is black text on a white background. Yes. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short, state that the minimum contrast ratio for a color to be accessible should be at least 4.5 to 1 contrast. Anything below that isn't accessible for all users. Therefore, if your website doesn't have the correct settings in terms of contrasting colors, you're missing out on selling to these website visitors. So my pro tip for you on color contrast would be that all colors need to be contrasting for those with red-green color blindness and other visual impairments. Now, online color contrast checking tools like Colorable, which is the one I'm showing in my gift, can help you visualize your colors and make sure they're ADA compliant. Just simply enter the color codes and it will verify whether or not they're accessible. Great. Now we're moving on to step 4, which is cursor interaction. While everyone enjoys a website that feels friendly, human-like, engaging, and playful, out of all the different interactions, there's one that truly stands out, and that's the mouse-based interaction. And the good news is that we can take advantage of this to make sure the user is aware of the interactions on the buttons, on the hyperlinks, and the other website elements. A hover effect is simply a change of color, size, shape, image, etc. of an element while you put a mouse arrow over it. Easy, right? However, there's a fine line between what's accessible and what's not in terms of these interactions. While we shouldn't depend exclusively on hover effects to show information that couldn't be accessible without a mouse, they should be accessible as long as they follow color contrast guidelines and that they're visible and distinguishable from their normal state, like these buttons that I have here. Now take a look at this example. You can only see the Explore link, the price, the ranking, and the sharing options after you hover, correct? Now remember our first step when we talked about keyword navigation and how people use the tab key to navigate through the site? If essential information such as price and CTA are hidden beneath the hover effect, it will be skipped over. Now, on this other example, the hover states of these two products highlight with a darker color, both the image and the CTA. Now that's a successful set of interactions. So in this steps pro tip, remember you should create states that communicate their purpose and action. They can visually indicate to the user that you can click on an element. Keep color contrast in mind as you design these states, and remember it's important that the change is noticeable. Awesome. We're halfway there. Let's move on to step 5. Simple language. Everyone reads at different levels and has differing abilities to understand text content. Things like reading disorders, memory disorders, attention deficit disorders, and other conditions which affect the brain's cognitive processes can also compromise a person's ability to comprehend text. Studies from the United States Department of Education show that only 15% of Americans demonstrate a level of full literacy, which is equivalent to a university undergraduate level. On the other hand, the average American reads at a 7th or 8th grade level. This means that the language that we use on our websites has to be understandable for people of all reading levels. Now, to help you get the content right, there are online tools that can help you and tell you which reading level the content is. Take, for example, Hemingway. It's an online app that highlights lengthy, complex sentences and common errors. It can also tell you when a sentence is so dense and complicated that your readers will get lost trying to follow its meandering. Internal read-throughs are another tool that you can use to make sure your website content is accessible. Have another member of your team help you figure out whether or not your content is clear and simple, and it's making sense to the users. So, in this pro tip, I want to remind you that the language we use on our websites has to accommodate readers of all levels, including and below the average. Assume that your readers are intelligent, but do not assume that they know the subject matter as well as you do. It will depend on how familiar your audience is with the topic. So explaining concepts is not insulting, it's helpful. Obviously, as long as the explanations show that you respect the users, correct? That leads us to step number 6, which is alternative text. Now, adding alternative text for images is the first principle of web accessibility. And this is because computers and screen readers cannot analyze an image and determine what the image represents. Alt text, which is a short for alternative text, is used within the website's code to describe the appearance and function of an image on a page. This goes for screen readers, browsers that block images, images that didn't load, or even when the user has chosen not to view images. But it also includes users who are sight impaired or are simply unable to visually identify an image. Including alt text with your images ensures all users, regardless of their visual ability, that they can appreciate the content on your site. See this example that I have here. The alt text for this image would be something clear and descriptive, like true friends taking a selfie photograph. A good technique could be to close your eyes and then try and describe what you just seen. Sounds easy, right? Using alt text on your images can make for a better user experience, but it may also help you earn both explicit and implicit SEO benefits and contribute to improved image SEO. In the end, it provides meaning and description to images, which can be read by search engines or be used to determine the content of the image from page context alone. So here's my pro tip for you. Alt text should be used on all photos to accommodate people browsing your site. Describe the image as specifically as possible. It should describe exactly what one sees in the photo. But all things come with a limit. Avoid keyword stuffing. You'll be in trouble if you use your alt text as an opportunity to stuff in as many relevant keywords as you can think of just to gain ranking on Google, for example. Excellent. We're making good progress. Let's now talk about step 7. Correct markup. Also known as semantic structure, this refers to the correct order of the code you use on your website and how each element is labeled. When browsing a lengthy web page, sighted users often scroll the page quickly and look for big, bold text or headings to get an idea of the structure and the content of the page. Now, on the other hand, screen readers and other assistive technology users also have the ability to navigate web pages by heading structure, meaning that the user can view a list of all the headings on the page and navigate directly to top level headings labeled as H1, next level headings or H2, third level headings or H3, and so on. When referring to headers, each page on the website should start with an H1 label, followed by H2 and up to H6. Their sole purpose is to designate a hierarchy of headline importance, so that both human readers and automatic search engines can look at a document and easily determine its information structure. If you use them appropriately, don't skip them and only use one headline marked as H1 per page, it will be good for SEO. Why? Simple, because Google bots crawl the page just as a screen reader would, meaning an accessible, correctly marked up site is easier to scan, which results in better ranking, honestly. Now, on this pro tip, I urge you to keep in mind correct markup when styling your headline tags. Developing tools such as CSS can allow us to change the heading fonts and colors to match your branding and visual preferences while maintaining the correct web page hierarchy. At the end of the day, screen readers and other assistive technologies ignore visual styling and focus primarily on semantics and structure. So it's important you make sure that your markup makes sense, both visually and structurally. And last but not least, here's step 8, form labels and instructions. Now, us creatives can get carried away when it comes to design trends. We might be tempted to go for a simple and modern design. But why sacrifice accessibility for aesthetics? Lately, we've seen how forms, which are normally composed of labels, fields, and a send button, have been simplified to remove labels and replace them for placeholder text over the fields. Now, this text is usually gray and has very low contrast. And if you're like me, you even forget what you're typing, making it hard for users to know what the fields are asking us in the first place. So as you've learned today, people who use screen readers usually navigate through a form using the tab key to jump throughout the form controls. Any non-label text as placeholder text is usually skipped over, complicating things for our users. So why don't you keep your form labels, rephrase your placeholder text to help users fill out each field better, and add sublabel information that might be necessary for users to understand what you're asking them to fill out. These simple steps will guarantee accessibility for all users on this important component of your website. And our very last pro tip of today is remember, users are your website consumers. Design trends and styles should come across with your branding, your website overall styling, and your structure. The bottom line is, please never compromise accessibility for personal preferences and latest trends. Whew. Now, how about we go through a little recap of what we learned today? Number 1, keep an eye on focus indicators. Play with their settings to make them fit your brand. 2, be descriptive with your CTAs. Keep them specific and begin building trust among your users. 3, make sure your brand colors are contrasting enough to guarantee legibility on your site. Use mouse over effects to indicate your visitors where to click. Number 5,
Use tools to make sure your content is accessible to all reading levels.
Consider alternative text when adding new images. It will improve your website's SEO. Now, 7. Set up your content in a hierarchical order to maintain coherency on screen readers and enhance your Google ranking. And then finally, keep your forms, labels, and write instructions to guide your users into giving you the information that you need. So, what is the main takeaway in all of this? I want you to ask yourselves, and everyone out there who's got a website and is offering any type of services, tours, or activities to people from all over the world, are we doing enough to not only reach compliance, but really taking the steps to make sure our website is providing a truly great experience for all users? I'd like you to take this opportunity to think outside the box and grow your audience. Create inclusive content that can help you expand your business and build an intuitive website for all of your visitors. And there you have it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And thanks again to Peek for giving me the opportunity to spread awareness about website accessibility.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really good.
Thank you. That's all right.
That was brilliant. I think we all now have some really concrete tips for how we can make our websites more accessible. And it's just so helpful and important to be reminded that not everyone accesses things the same way we do, and to just be aware of that when we're designing. I know you put your email address there, so if anyone does have any questions, please do take that down and send them over to ANDIE, who as mentioned, she's happy to take questions. I know you're quite pressed for time, but can I just squeeze in a couple of questions?
Sure.
It's so cool that you're based in Santiago, but have many clients based in the US and work for an international company. In terms of that work with clients in the US, do you still have to comply to ADA?
Yeah, I'd say definitely yes. And this goes not only for the people that are based in the US, but everyone around the world. Remember that we're designing for all of our users in general, not only those from the US or those with specific disabilities. You know that different countries have different regulations, so I can't really say. But what I do know is that we shouldn't worry too much about the law itself and complying to it, but rather just make sure that our website complies with the web content accessibility guidelines, which are the most important ones, to avoid any kind of limitation to our clients or visitors of our websites.
Right. So I guess it kind of acts as a useful helpline for you, guidelines. Another quick question, when you are using a background image below text content, does the minimum contrast also apply?
Good question. Good question, yes. Although it's a little bit more complicated, it should also apply. So what we do regarding images normally is that just as the tool I mentioned for color contrast checking, there's also one in particular that can test the contrast for the background image and the text. It's called brandwood.com/A11Y. And what we do is we run over images through this tool, and we select the color of the text that is going to be over this image, just to make sure that the combination is perfectly readable and we're not compromising the legibility of our websites. Yeah.
Okay, so if you can catch those email addresses or websites that Andrea's mentioned, don't worry, this has been recorded and will be sent to your inbox, so you can make some notes. and go back and listen to what you've enjoyed. Thank you so much, Andrea, for taking part. It's so interesting and a really important and helpful reminder.
Thank you for having me.
No, have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.